All right, we're back. Episode number 11. We've got Nico, founder and CEO of Default. Really
Hey,
cool
what's going on,
company.
guys?
Yeah. We're super excited to have you on here. We're going to ask you a million questions. We're going to make
Sweet.
you hopefully uncomfortable a little bit, but get some
Sweet.
really great stuff out of you, man. You're building something amazing. So just want
Awesome, man.
the
Appreciate
audience
it.
to know who you are, who's the face behind Default, one of the many now. You guys are growing
Yeah.
fast. So yeah, let's get into it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate
For
it.
sure. So Nico, I'm gonna hit you with a hard hitting question immediately, but
Cool.
this is like a tale as old as time. SaaS founder, tech founder, dropped out of college to become a founder. Tell us a story. How did this happen? What is your background? And how are you so comfortable taking that leap?
Yeah. Funny enough, like I don't really, I don't know. I can't really remember a time where I didn't like ideas. I didn't like building, and I didn't like, the concept of, or the opportunity to like win something. And that's been that's kind of been the case for as long as I can remember. The classic, like, started building stuff in high school, and went into college, found out that I, sort of discovered, and, in hindsight, not very surprising, that I liked building stuff and tinkering like way more than I liked going to class. My co-founder was pretty much the same way. So, I think like the journey, I guess it's super like, everything gets kind of memorialized in hindsight, but there were like two really big inflection points for me. I think the first one was, and they're pretty near one another, but they're both like really, really important. I think like the story really at the end of the day is like, for a long time, like like I said, I really liked ideas. I really liked building and tinkering with them, and just so happens that I really like software as well, software businesses and software products, and I'm very curious about what makes software businesses work. And while I was in college, my co-founder and I started our first sort of like hello world kind of company that was just like accounting billing software for parking companies, and that was like our way of like figuring out how to build stuff, how to sell it. And it was like all on hard mode, right? We had like no idea what we were doing. But that sort of created this kind of snowball effect for us where we really, really went into the world of startups. And, when we started out, we had no clue what a startup was. We just, wanted to build stuff and wanted to,
You saw the social network and you're like, I want that.
Funny enough, I never watched The Social Network until like a year and a half or 2 years into building Default. So like pretty recently, for the first time, like maybe a year and a half ago or something, I watched the movie and I was like, oh wow, this is fun. This is interesting. So, I think the two really big inflection points for me were, number one, like deciding to leave college. And the second one was kind of like this moment in my first, like, it hadn't even been like the first couple of weeks that I was in San Francisco, where I kind of just realized like, a lot of the reasons that, or, a lot of the like stories I told myself on like why taking the leap or like building the thing would be hard were actually like not real. And, embracing the fact that you can just do things, and like there really are like no rules that kind of govern what you can and can't do. Those are like the two, I think, like really big inflection points for me. They all happen like within like a 3 to 6 month time horizon. So, I kind of just remember like going to, like dropped out. I moved to San Francisco in this like hacker house, and I was like living in this guy's room while he was in like Russia or something, and he had no furniture, so it was just like a mattress on the floor. I was like, oh wow, this is kind of sick. Like,
Awesome.
It's like, this is pretty awesome. Like, there's no, I'm like surrounded by really smart people who, are all kind of like very ambitious, and they're all building things. And, kind of in that first like 1 or 2 weeks, I had the chance to like go and like, kind of meet one of the people I had like really, I'd like put on a pedestal for a really long time. Like I went up to the guy at this, the classic San Francisco like house party where like everyone leaves their shoes at the door, and like, everyone's like not really making eye contact. And I had the chance to like, meet them and meet a few other people that I kind of like looked up to for a long time. I kind of just, had this kind of clicking moment where everything fell into place. And I was like, oh wow, this is, you can kind of just do things. And, there are really no rules to, kind of define like what you can and cannot build. It's just a matter of like being curious and kind of relentless and figuring stuff out. So
Who?
Yeah, I was going to say, who are some of those people that you looked up to?
yeah. I mean, the classic like OG YC folks, the kind of like from the first string of people. I think one who's like it's pretty funny. I had this conversation with Justin Kahn while I was still in college. Actually, I like cold DM'd him or something, and was like, hey man, I'm like working on this thing, and sort of like kind of like baited him into like taking a call with me, and it was like the worst pitch like imaginable. It was terrible. He's like, dude, like, where are you right now? I was like, oh, I'm like in my college apartment. He's like, you should just drop out of college. Like, what's the downside of doing this? And I was like, guy has a pretty fair point. Like, there's really well, like, I've been kind of like I'd been thinking about it for like quite a while. It was like for my first semester of college, I was like, wow, I do not belong here. What I was kind of thinking was, dropping out it's like it's really a loss aversion thing, right? Like there's this sort of illusion for me at least, and this is not the case for everybody, but for me, it was like, I don't really have very much to lose, dropping out of college, towards like the end of my college career, right? Like I'd go back, I'd do like, I don't know, it's like 10 or 14 credit hours or something, like absolute worst case, like move back in with my parents, and I like, I get to hang out with them for a few months while I kind of, lick my wounds and like, figure stuff out. But, the upside of actually like dropping out was like sort of undefined and, kind of infinite, right? So there was like this tremendous upside that I was like not able to expose myself to, by just like staying in school and kind of continuing to, major in stuff that I really had no real like long-term interest in, right? It was like something that like scratched my itch and like, let me be curious and stuff like that and like figure out how things worked. But I was not going to be a mechanical engineer or physicist. So, that was probably the right call, I think, in hindsight. So
it's such an interesting time. Oh, sorry, Ali. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned your co-founder a couple of times. Is that current co-founder at Default?
Yeah, Victor. He's back here somewhere.
Okay.
But yeah, he and I built our first company together, and we've been on the ride together since we started Default a couple of years ago.
Same age.
So
yeah, I think he's a year younger than me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm curious to know a little bit more about like the origin story of Default, like how you guys started it and like what your vision was in the beginning and how it's grown since then.
Yeah, definitely. It's really funny. I just gave this was like a really big topic for us, like during our all hands today. So it's like very, very fresh and sort of top of mind. But, when we started, or actually before we started, we kind of started with like a very kind of like big picture thesis, I guess, of like how the world might change over the course of the next kind of 5 to 10 years. And there were these, we were very, I think we were very studious maybe around like software businesses and like the business models that governed the world of software and stuff like that from pretty early on. And, a lot of this was like thinking about how you kind of like what's the recipe for building like a winning software company. And it was like something we were like really curious about. And we talked about like quite a bit. And we had these like really key kind of like 3 observations that we had sort of made. One was that the cost of building software was approaching zero. And this is like back in like 2021, right? Where for us, like that meant like not having to log into the AWS console to spin up, infrastructure to build something, right? And like we had no idea that, AI code gen would be a thing. We just, figured, we were kind of observing that it's getting easier and easier to build and deploy and maintain and manage software applications. So, the second observation was that single product software businesses were probably going to face these like really big kind of compounding distribution inefficiencies, right? Like CAC was going up, everything is getting, more competitive. Every kind of like, basically like every problem in software, every like easy problem in software has been sort of like picked over. And there's like more or less, you sort of like throw a stone, like you're going to hit like 5 software vendors that all sell like more or less the same thing, right? Some derivative of like the same product or the same app. The third thing was actually that we kind of had this bet that software businesses would probably approach some, at some point in the future, like everything would be like usage based or like consumption based or something like that, instead of being like solely platform and seat based. This is actually because like we were paying for this enrichment service really early on, and we had to buy based on like platform tiers instead of like the number of credits we were consuming. And that's like, we were really pissed that we had to spend like all this money to access just more and more volume of data. So the sort of thesis that we came up with there is that like software markets are going to get really, really big, much bigger than they were, a few years ago. And like the big reason for that is like the business model for distributing software is going to get a lot more efficient. It's not going to be like seat or platform fee based. It's going to be like consumption and usage based. And as a result, like, it's going to be like a Javon's paradox for just using and consuming software. It's just going to be usage and consumption based. So, but yeah, I mean, what we sort of assumed was like, software is going to get hyper competitive, and it's going to be harder to build like a standalone, like one single product company that ends up becoming a really big business because of this competition. And that like in the very long term, like the moat that you will have is, what it will probably come down to is just being able to afford paying a much higher acquisition cost for the same customer than, relative to like the other 3 to 5 vendors, the other 3 to 5 like identical SKU vendors that are selling the same thing, right? And the reason that you would be able to do this is if you're multi-product and you have like a higher theoretical like LTV, right? So if you have like if you're multi-product and you have like multiple things that you can sell one customer, as a result of that, you have a much, much higher LTV, right? You can sell them like 10 products instead of one. You can probably afford to pay a lot more money to acquire the customer and service them over time. So that, and then kind of the usage-based component. So we kind of started with like this view of the world, which is like super, super macro. Right? It's like very, very big picture, super kind of San Francisco heady, so to speak. And we'd spend a lot of time at our last company, like figuring out how to like build out our go to market, which is not how we thought about it before. We just thought about like, let's, sell as much software with the least amount of effort possible. And for us, what ended up happening was like, we were sort of doing like a very dumbed down version of RevOps, but it was because, Victor was like chaining together like all these APIs and making these tools talk to one another without us having to go in and like figure out how stuff worked and like, figure out what buttons to push and stuff like that. And the sort of like meta observation we made was that a lot of go-to-market teams were spending all this money on software and data. Like, everyone buys a CRM, everyone buys scheduling, everyone buys enrichment, everyone buys like email sequencing, etc. And they were doing this as a way to like buy or enable these like marginal operational improvements and like efficiency gains. And that at the end of the day, like a lot of these software tools basically they all just interacted with and talked to the same underlying information, right? It's all like accounts, it's all contacts, it's all page views, etc. And in a lot of cases, they shared a ton of like they were all like very, very redundant in terms of what they actually did, right? There's a lot of redundant functionality across all these applications. So I'd read like software really early on. So I was like very like Larry Ellison pilled about this like whole enterprise like business suite kind of concept. And what we saw was that there are all these like data silos and like all this administrative burden that goes into kind of managing all these software tools, and like you sort of the value of RevOps ends up becoming, being able to generate a really accurate report and like manage like information, you basically like duplicate information definitions across all these software tools. So, but ironically, like, all these data silos and all this administrative overhead would just create even more demand for software and data. So it was this sort of like self-fulfilling kind of like vicious cycle of, just buying tools to solve problems while, more tools just create more problems. So, the kind of takeaway we had was that there was this really valuable company that no one seemed to be building, which was this kind of unified like app and data layer that not only bundled the apps, so like, the scheduling, the forms, the enrichment, the email sending, all that stuff, but also like allowed you to consume data to make, the underlying workflows a lot better. And, the sort of like classic things like growth is data problem. We wanted to enable people to solve the first party data problem with like really good bundled apps and the ability to sort of consume data in this kind of like a marketplace like fashion. That was kind of like the founding thesis default. We figured that the best place to start doing that is kind of like the inbound funnel, which is where you have like a ton of fragmentation of a ton of software fragmentation. Like you've got all these like free radicals of information that are kind of like floating around like on the website, right? You've got page views, you've got form submissions, you've got like form IDs, and all this stuff just gets joined to like the operational definitions of a company, like their routing rules, their territory definitions, their segment definitions, like the types of events that people use to book meetings, and everything else. So it was like kind of the entry point for everything else in the stack. We kind of start building and kind of joining everything and could go downstream. And we figured that, if you end up joining all of that, you end up with this really good kind of like platform foundation that you can build on top of, and that over time becomes like a really good kind of like underlying layer to build on top of. So that's kind of that was the sort of like founding thesis and genesis behind Default.
That is a hell of a way to describe it. So you just gave us 15 answers in one, which I appreciate.
Cool. Nice.
My camera keeps going off. We live in Atlanta, and it's
no worries.
Also 96 degrees here, like every single day. And I sit next to a window, and it just overheats my camera. So I have to turn my house on like 68 degrees in order to keep my camera on. But anyways, so you just gave the entire thesis on how Default started. So now help the audience understand what is Default. What do you guys actually solve? And do you have any dramatic success stories you can talk about where how a customer implemented Default, was able to eliminate all these different tools like Calendly, maybe even like a Clay, things like that, to do all of that work that Point Solutions were doing under one platform?
Yeah, definitely. So, like I mentioned, we kind of started with the inbound funnel as like the first kind of like vantage point to start building like the longer term kind of like platform. And usually when people, hire our product to do something for them or like solve a problem for them, they're usually like these really, really small kind of problems, right? So one example is, you start spending money on ads, and you start like spending money on content, and then your inbound starts trickling up, right? And, this inflow of opportunity to sell, or this inflow of opportunity demand, makes you a lot more sensitive to not dropping those leads, or, making sure that like every qualified form submission that comes in can translate into like a qualified opportunity or a qualified demo booked, right? So you can kind of run the sales process and, translate that demand into revenue, right?
Yeah. And it's a huge problem, by the way. That's actually
it's a big problem.
I mean, as an agency, we generate a ton of leads for our clients, highly qualified, and they don't have a clear way to act on it. A lot of them actually use Default, which is great. But awesome. They need a way to act on it. So it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. It's that's like one of the problems that we solve, and that's kind of like our core thing. Now there are a lot of other like side quests that our customers tend to go on after we solve that first problem for them. I think like our, very few companies like really think about their go-to-market or their distribution, that part of the company is like a product that you ship and you manage and you iterate on all the time. And one of the things that we observe a lot is that very few companies seem to have like a good understanding of how the process and the strategy, how all these like bits and pieces of the stack and like the process and the theory like come together under the hood. It's one thing to like map everything out in like FigJam or in Miro, and like sort of like, design the ideal process. And it's another thing to like translate that into like architecture, right? Via software tools, right? Like usually I think, people might kind of, they might like define it on FigJam or Miro. And then, they basically got like all these different apps that are like talking to one another, and are like, working together super elegantly in theory. And then, when it comes time to like actually turn that into a workflow or a system or like a real information system architecture, that, everything kind of falls apart. And like a big reason for that is like, you've got all these data silos, you've got a bunch of APIs that don't really talk to one another. So what ends up happening is, customers will like, they'll buy all these software products and, try and like chain them together with like webhooks or like Zapier or like a bunch of other like kind of these no code solutions or Clay. Yeah. And what ends up happening is like, you don't really have this, you don't really have like a product that you can kind of manage super well, and that creates a ton of overhead. That's like why everyone has, operations teams that are, not only like implementing and managing and maintaining all these like SaaS products, but also like, they're trying to figure out how they can, architect the way these tools talk to one another in a way that they can use to extract insights to make the right decision faster. Right. So, what ends up happening, I think for a lot of our customers is like they solve one problem and then like, for example, like connecting, their form on the website to their reps calendars, right? And defining the rules for like routing and for qualification, stuff like that, which surprisingly, one of the big learnings for us has been like, there's this sort of canonical kind of like ICP, TAM, qualification playbook and, these kind of like guidelines that we've all kind of like, learned about and we're supposed to be like practicing, as like go-to-market teams. And, very rarely do people actually like abide by them. And I think a big reason for that is like a lot of the systems that people use don't actually, there's no like ICP, like you don't define your ICP anywhere in, your go-to-market stack. It usually lives in like a Google Doc or something like that. Right. So these systems are not really aware of these kind of like, of these like business logic primitives and whatnot. So, the idea here is like, we start off like solving one problem for you and, we try and give you the toolbox that you can use, the toolbox, the data, and like the apps that you can use to kind of solve other problems. Right. So we're in like the early innings of a big shift there, but, that's kind of the TLDR.
So if I were to summarize what Default actually does, so it's got a calendar scheduling platform built in, right? Mm-hmm. From there, when a lead comes in, let's say they use the calendar app, they can use that. It'll come in, it'll enrich any data you need based on whatever workflow that you build. So you have everything you could ever need to know, whether it's pre-call research, whether it's more contact information to push into your CRM or anything like that. That's one portion of Default. The other thing is it could be an inbound lead that comes in from your CRM. Let's say something gets pushed into the CRM, a list gets created, that list pushes immediately to Default, Default enriches it further, and then pushes it back in. Am I right?
Yeah. That's a great example of something we do.
Amazing. Yeah. Do you have any like very specific use cases where you've seen clients just have that holy shit moment where they try it, they build something and they're like, how the hell was I ever doing anything different than this before?
Yeah. There are lots of those. One of my like favorite ones to talk about, which is like not obvious, but I think like goes, I think like kind of directionally indicates like what we want to enable for customers, like really, really easily, is a customer that came in, they set us up for, inbound scheduling, qualification, routing, et cetera. And then they started building on top of our, on top of default workflows. So they basically set up a workflow for basically, a bunch of things that they were doing manually, like reconciling data definitions across their stack, like connecting HubSpot and Salesforce and just making sure that like leads and contacts, kind of like, worked really well together, converting leads to contacts and, enforcing all these like SLAs that were typically these like kind of like made up political rules and like human rituals, like, everyone updating their pipeline on Monday before their, pipeline review call and stuff like that. But one of the really interesting use cases that we've seen, and this is, obviously a non-core one that we don't really advertise, but maybe we should, has been someone coming in, they have this like really big, like, call like a secondary kind of pain point that we were in a really good position to solve, which is that, they had the CPQ system that had like a bunch of custom properties that were not reading and writing back to Salesforce. So what they did is they hooked up their CPQ system to default and used a bunch of AI prompts and AI nodes in default to transform, all these fields into Salesforce compatible strings of information that could just read and write back to Salesforce. So we solved like a really big like rev rec problem for them as like a sort of side quest via default workflows. So it was that was a really cool one that I like to brag about quite a bit.
Yeah, how do you even say that simplified? I don't know if there is a way to say it. Yeah, that's why you haven't marketed it yet. You can't figure out to say it in a simple way.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm going to be honest. You scream San Francisco and just the way you think about things and the way you speak about things, your level of philosophical thinking, that type of stuff. So you went from SF to New York, right?
I did, yeah.
Where are you from originally?
I was born in Argentina. I moved to the States with my parents when I was very young. Lived in Florida while my dad was going to grad school. We lived in this like grad student housing like village for like 5 years. And then we moved up to rural Kentucky. So I'm an Argentine at heart and, also like a small town Kentucky boy as well. So,
so Kentucky, so Argentina to Florida to Kentucky to
California.
SF.
Yeah.
Then back to New York.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So did you adopt this mindset and the way you think about things, like being so philosophical in SF, or have you always been like that?
I think I had some parts of it when I was younger, but I think SF like really just kind of like fanned the flame. I think looking at things differently, and I think it's really I think like one of the earlier points I made was like kind of figuring out like there are really no rules or like there's no reason why like some truth is like actually true. And what this really translates to is like ignoring conventional wisdom.
Yeah,
a lot, which that's also something like I'll brag about. Like we do ignore conventional wisdom like quite a bit. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but it's all in light of like kind of like seeing what is actually true as opposed to just like accepting what is conventionally true and kind of like running with it. Cause I think that's a very, very limiting way of like building a company, especially like right now. Right. I think, Victor and I have for a really long time, we've adopted this, we've always like joked about this adage that we coined really early on, which is like, our job is not to prove that we're right. It's to be right and like get to the right answer. And I think that's like sentiment that I've held for a pretty long time. I think like intellectual honesty is like a really important thing to have if you're building a company and you're like, you're serving customers and you're employing people and you're, especially if other people are like trusting you with their capital to build something, like you have to be like really intellectually honest and like, sometimes look in the mirror and figure out like, I'm wrong. So, yeah.
I think that's a huge part of entrepreneurship in general. It's like one, challenging conventional wisdom. You learn all these things in school and it's designed to give you a structure so you can go work for another company and, be a cog in a machine, which is completely necessary. And there's a massive need for that in the world. Not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur. But I think anyone who builds a successful business is used to challenging the norm and building their own truth and coming up with these ways to basically just come up with something that's never been done before. So it's pretty standard, I feel like, from what we hear from every entrepreneur that we have on this show. Everybody has a very unique story, but no one's story is similar. It's super interesting.
Yeah, everything's very unique. I think one thing I've been thinking about recently is we've been kind of going through our own like reinvention as a team and a company and product and everything is like this idea of just being able to embrace and like kind of harness randomness and chaos. It's like that's a really, especially right now. I mean, like all my founder friends like are sort of like founder homie group chat is like rife with everyone sort of crashing out, not quite crashing out, but everyone's like, shit, like I wonder if we should really take a really big swing. Like I'm watching like Cursor and all these other companies like grow so incredibly quickly and like markets are changing and like, the calcification that has sort of like built up in markets and how we think about, what markets are good and what markets are bad is kind of like changing a lot. Like services businesses like 6 years ago were like radioactive, right? And it turns out like right now, like having a services base or some sort of like forward deployed engineer, element to your business is actually like a huge competitive advantage. If you're building like an AI company and like, selling to enterprises, right? Like being able to forward deploy services is a huge competitive advantage. So like that's conventional wisdom that, should probably be ignored. But yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of like, everyone I know who's like really smart is like trying to figure out like how they can reinvent themselves and like maximize the upside.
And I think people are just taking bigger swings as a whole. I don't know. I sent Ali this video last night. There's this company, Cluely. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
They're making the most insane content I have ever seen for any B2B business in the world. And it's paying off. I mean, they're taking huge swings. And, like they were saying some of the most outrageous stuff I've ever seen on any B2B advertisement ever made. I sent it to Ali. The thing has like 5,000 reactions. They've generated, I think they're like 11 or 12 million in ARR in 3 months. Something insane like that. And it's like, I'm looking at it. That kid is, I think, 21. He's from where we're from, by the way. He's from Duluth, Georgia. And,
he's from Georgia,
And it's just like this kid dropped out of school, took the risk of being banned from tech, basically in perpetuity, right? Like cheated on his interviews, made posts about it. It's like that can go one of two ways. It can go the way it did go, which is probably like a 1% likelihood to actually happen. Or it can go the other 99%, which is where he is screwed for the rest of at least 5 years. I would say he's blacklisted at that point from any big tech company that is going to pay him what he probably wanted to get paid. So it's like you're seeing companies like that spin up. And then, I don't want to say we're old, but compared to him, we're old, right? Like late 20s, early 30s, like that to take swings like that at our age, it's scary. It's one of those things. It's like, am I going to risk everything that we've built, the entire reputation I've built up until this point to take one of those big swings? It's like, it's extremely conflicting because you want to challenge the norm. You want to challenge the status quo. You want to do something like that. You want to be outrageous, but it's like, man.
That's been another really big theme for us internally is this idea of like strategic curiosity versus status preservation. Like the safest thing we could do is just like preserve the, whatever status we may or may not have today as like a, as a vendor or as a company, or like for me as like, a founder or whatever. And that's like the safest thing we can do. And then there's also like there's also like a lot of upside that's kind of there. You just kind of have to risk like losing your status, I guess, to harness it and kind of expose yourself to any form of asymmetric upside. So
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Nico, on the topic of reinvention for Default specifically, like I saw you guys announce like a funding raise or like a round or something last week. Is that right?
It was no, it couldn't have been last week. I think it was probably a few months ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
But in there you talked about like Default 2.0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means and what are like the actual product changes that you guys made.
Yeah, definitely. So Default 2.0 is it's a few months old now, so we're working on 3.0. But the idea behind
startup years, that's ancient.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like a lifetime. So I think Default 1.0 was essentially a few apps, so scheduling, forms, routing, all kind of connected to this really, really flexible kind of workflow engine, right? This like orchestration tissue. And we let you consume some data through it, right? Some enrichment data that we kind of partner with enrichment vendors to power various parts of the platform with and sort of resell as a result. And Default 2.0, like the biggest kind of difference is a lot more flexibility in the kinds of workflows that you can power with Default. And what that basically translated to was us supporting like more data vendors, more integrations, and different kinds of data, right? So before it was just enrichment. Now it's also like generated data from AI agents. It's like website intent data and some intent signals as well. And then basically letting you do a little bit more with that information within your kind of decision making engine, which is our workflow builder. So that was kind of the big theme behind Default 2.0.
It's really interesting. I feel like most tech companies these days, especially startups, are going like the traditional route. Well, traditional sounds insane for what I'm about to say, but like it has LLMs built into it, or you can integrate with an LLM. Next step is it becomes agentic. And I feel like the next thing that everyone's chasing is just AGI. But it's just like a crazy place where we're at, where things are moving so quickly. Like 2.0 was agentic, and now it's like, what isn't agentic is kind of how it feels. It's just such a crazy pace that things are moving at. It's almost impossible for people to keep up. It's been great for our business because we're on the forefront of everything. So people come to us and say, hey, can you implement this for us? Like transparently, I can't tell you how many people come to us and say, hey, we just bought Default, but we don't know how to use it yet. Can you just come in and build that for us also?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. We'll play around.
Yeah, definitely. I think funny enough, I think this whole this idea of kind of, you sort of like buy the tool and you sort of buy the service separately is really, really interesting. Like it's sort of juxtaposed to the like a big narrative that was happening that was kind of being talked about maybe like a year or two ago, which was like service as a software. Which actually, is not even juxtaposed. It's kind of the same thing. You're just paying for software and service separately in most cases, right? No, only in like the forward deployed engineer, like super high ACV selling AI products to enterprises world, do you see like, the service as a software thing like really kind of take shape. But yeah, I mean, it feels like people know less about how their tools work and what their tools are doing under the hood today than they did like 4 years ago. So that's interesting trend.
Yeah, and then the services as a software thing. I don't know if you follow Marcel Santilli or if you know Marcel Santilli.
Yeah.
We had him on the show a few weeks ago. He's a friend of ours. And it's like he literally left these insane positions. He was a CMO at Scale AI. Like he's done crazy stuff, And he just noticed like, okay, I have all of these talents. I have all of these skills that I've built up over the years that now I can augment with AI and become 15 times more effective than I ever was. Why don't I just build my own version of this, document my workflows, and then convert them into code by hiring an engineer that can basically take what I'm doing, record me doing it, and then turn it into code. And now he has this insane business. He scaled to 7 million, I think, in like, there goes my camera. But he scaled to like 7 million in, I want to say like 6 months.
Yeah.
It has pipeline to get to like 13 million. It's just like unprecedented speed. And it's like companies like this are popping up all over the place. Like we're not quite at that level, but we're growing pretty rapidly ourselves, And it's like it's a very similar process. So I think my camera's going to explode.
All good. No worries.
You want to turn down your AC, Alex?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. All right, we're back. Camera's fixed. Hopefully, turn on the AC. But yeah, things are moving at a ridiculously rapid rate. It's just like a different landscape that no one's ever experienced, and I think it's the way of the world. Same thing back in the day when the internet started, and social media, and now we're here. But I do have a question for you that I'm interested in because I saw that you do some angel investing as well, right?
I am, every once in a while, I get to help someone buy a few office chairs or something like that with a measly angel check. But mainly just like supporting people and ideas that I like. So,
but it's a skill. That's the thing. It's like even if it's just a small check, even if you're saying it's just buying office chairs, it's a skill. Angel investing. Like Ali and I get approached all the time now to be angels in businesses. And it's one of those things like we haven't cracked the code on what makes a good investment yet in terms of angel investing. I don't know if you have either. I don't know if anyone really has. That's why it's so risky. But I'm curious what you look for because I'm thinking nowadays, like I see someone like Roy Lee who founded Cluely, right? We were just talking about that. And I'm thinking like this kid is outrageous, probably going to end up in jail at some point, but might make $100 million before that happens, right? Like that gets me excited more so than somebody who is taking the safe route, has an amazing business plan, has a history of success, and might make a 1x or a 2x. A 2x on my investment, something like that. I see a Roy Lee, and that gets me fired up. But I'm curious, like, what do you take? What's your take on something like that? What's your take on angel investing? How do you identify a good founder? Things like that.
I don't think I don't know. I definitely have not. I would not call myself like an investor by any means, but I think I'm like 60 deep now. So it's like, you kind of see what tends to work and like sometimes like what doesn't work. And I think like what I try and avoid is, like really, really obvious, like well-rounded kind of ideas and like I think founders, I think like if it really it needs to spike somewhere, you know. It really needs to spike somewhere. And I think like I'm, you know, this maybe isn't correct, but I think that I have had a lot more success, if you even want to call it that, or I've seen like, you know, a better indication that, you know, the super tenured people that are starting a company, I think it doesn't tend to work out as well. Like at least like if they're super tenured, or if they were like the, you know, the, I don't know, if they started some like crazy, like, you know, multi-billion-dollar company in the past, or they were like an executive at a really big company in the past. Like, I think for me, I guess I have not seen those work as well. But I also like have not seen like the super non-obvious bets work well either. I think there's like a good happy medium where like someone like did something and it got to a certain scale, but you know, maybe it didn't work or didn't work as well as they thought it was going to work. And now they have like a really good reason for, you know, kind of willing something new into existence and like being there and kind of embracing the suck, because, you know, at the end of the day, it is, you know, you have to have like a really good reason to start a company, because like it's very hard, right? Like I think starting a company starting a company for the wrong reason is like one of the most painful, grueling processes you can force yourself to endure. And it can also be like the most fulfilling process ever, right? And it's still going to be hard, but like it can either be incredibly grueling because you're not being fulfilled, right? You're not self-actualizing, or you're not treating your company as like the vessel for your self-actualization or whatever. Yeah, I think this is where like being intellectually honest, like also, you know, is good. It's like it's, you know, arguably you know, not even arguably, it's a requirement for, I think, starting a company and making it work. You got to be like really intellectually honest. And I think like that's probably one of the things that try and suss out that, and like, you know, making sure that, you know, someone has a, you know, a non-consensus, or kind of like, you know, non-consensus, but potentially like very right. And like, if it's very right, it's very big view of the world. So yeah, I mean, everything's changing right now, so I might have a different answer to this in like, you know, 6 months. Yeah.
It's interesting. We had Santosh Sharan on Ollie. What was that, like early? It was Wednesday, I think.
Yep.
2 days ago, we had Santosh Sharan on, and he was saying he thinks his experience is actually a bit of a crutch, because he was saying like he's, you know, he's a person, or I guess second time founder right now, but it's been a while since he founded a company, and he was a president at Apollo. He was the COO at Apollo, I think, like a president at Zoom Info. Like he's worked at these massive data companies. And now that he's going off and doing his own thing, he's like, I think it's a crutch that I have this much experience, because I'm very much set in my ways about the way things should happen. Yet things are changing like crazy, and I don't necessarily have the same creative freedom I would had I done this 20 years ago. Super interesting. It makes sense though. You know, it's like sometimes you get to a point where you're probably more well suited to scale something from 5 to 25, which Santosh has done 20 or 8 times. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting. Ollie, I probably cut you off for the 15th time, so go ahead.
No, I think another thing we talked about in that call that was kind of relevant to this, and Nico, you were talking about it, is that Santosh also called it the golden age of agencies, which I think is related to what you were talking about. Like there's, you know, all this tech, and there has to be people who can implement it and, you know, have like the experimentation playground is how I think about it with all their different clients to be able to do it well. So yeah, curious your take on that, on how agencies like fit into everything.
Yeah, no, I think agencies, especially in like go-to-market land, I don't know very much about how other markets work, but I think for like sales and marketing software, agencies are a very important kind of like market actor, you know, because they are so close to the customer and they work with so many different customers, that, you know, they given the right tool, they can make the tool work for a customer's use case. And I think Clay is like a really good example of this, right? Like Clay is, it's a kind of Swiss Army knife. If you're a RevOps agency or go-to-market agency, you can basically make it fit any workflow. And, I think it is, it's a winner, in the agency, the agency market. And I think like, for most agency owners, I would imagine like, winning is, kind of growing revenue and like being profitable and kind of, not having some cash out date, right? Where you kind of like run out of cash, that, being like profitable from really, really early on and kind of being self-sustaining that's like, the dream state, right? I think it's hard. It doesn't really translate super well to like the venture backed startup model where like, the incentive on this side of the fence is like, grow as fast as possible and like win your market. We have like spent a good amount of time thinking about like what it means to win as an agency. And for us, like, we work with, 50 plus partners, today. And, we think about that because we want to help our agencies, our agency partners win, by working with us and, vice versa. So, I do think agencies are super important. And I think it's very good that they are growing in popularity and that there are more of them. So
how does it fit into your growth pattern? Oh, go ahead, Ollie.
Well, I was going to ask, like, what's your take on managed services internally versus like agency partnerships? Do you think you have to have both? Or can you lean more on the agency partnerships if the profit share is like set up the right way?
Yeah, I think managed services, I mean, it works if your ACV, can justify it, It does also kind of expose you to a lot more like execution or like operational risk. And this is kind of why like services has been such a dirty concept in, in Silicon Valley for such a long time is, if you need services, then you've built like the wrong product or, or whatever. So yeah, I think like back in the day, it was, the recipe for kind of winning as a software company was like you build the best product and you distribute it way better than everyone else. And there was always going to be like something wrong with your business, like there were you always like really suck at operations, or you would like really like, you wouldn't be good at something. And, now I think like to that earlier point, like the macro theses that we had, like from a really, really early point, like stuff is getting a lot more competitive. You got to be like, business is getting harder and you have to be better at many things to win. And, I'm defining winning as like building like the biggest business possible within a market. Right. So, I do think like managed services can be like a really good tool for that, a really good kind of way to win more or win bigger. Right. But, on the agency front, I think like agency partnerships, it's a really good model for like distribution and making sure that you can sort of expand your footprint, or, you've got a network of advocates that can not only help you like distribute your product and sort of like, spread the good word, if you will, but, also kind of like practice the implementation and the usage of your product. And they can be like phenomenal product design partners as well. So, sometimes like some of our best product feedback has come from folks who, implement the product and resell our product on our behalf. So, definitely a slept on, I think, market actor for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's becoming more and more important. Like I think Clay kind of set the standard for what like an agency relationship looks like. And yeah, it's just interesting. I think a lot of people talk about, like you're even saying, like the cost of creating software is going to zero. And so brand and like marketing is really important, but so is having like a really good product, one that actually works, and then also really good customer support. I think that's going to be a huge differentiator.
Huge differentiator. I think because of that too, like there's a very clear differentiator in terms of the way the actual software company treats its partners too. If you incentivize your partners to go and sell on your behalf, it can be an absolute moat for growth. Like Clay did it extremely well. HubSpot's done it extremely well. Salesforce has done it extremely well. It's like we say Clay was really the one who did it, but in reality, it's like HubSpot and Salesforce have been doing this for 15, 20 years, at scale. And it's like there is entire ecosystems built off of those products. And now Clay has done it really well. You guys are actually doing it really well. I mean, I'm in the partner chat. I feel like there's at this point 50, 60 different partners in there, something like that. I see companies like Adio starting to do it too. It feels like it's becoming a play that more and more companies are doing. So like they do the community thing where it's post a lot of content about workflows that you're creating with our product, things like that, create UGC. In turn, everybody wins because the agency gets reposted by the product who typically has a bigger following to begin with. Boom, they get business. The software company gets business. Everyone's winning. But eventually that's going to probably slow down too, because like anything good, you hit alpha and then it starts to deteriorate. So like, what do you think is next? What's the next distribution mode that's going to work really well for software companies?
One of the things that we've been thinking about a lot is, there's a couple different ways I can answer this. And I think like distribution moat. I don't know that I believe in moats anymore. I do think like distribution matters. Distribution matters more than anything, but I think like, in a world where distribution is king, like you have to build for distribution almost from day one, right? Especially today where like there's a sort of like land grab for new IT spend, a new exploratory AI budget, and like some of it may or may not be sticky, and the revenue may or may not be durable, but there's a really big land grab happening. And like I think building and architecting for distribution like really, really early on is the right thing to do, but it's also like incredibly hard to do that, right? And I get a lot of we talk a lot about like what's next in go to market, and this this observation we've made as I think especially in the last like 18 to 24 months, like the sales and marketing software space seems like it is becoming increasingly hyper competitive, right? And it's a really interesting space because like everyone within a stone's throw of the space, usually vendors especially are they sort of think in things like in increments. Innovation is incredibly incremental, right? Everyone is kind of adding signals. Everyone is adding more enrichment data. There's like a new shiny object like every 6 months. Like a year ago it was AI SDRs. Right now it's like enrichment data and like signals and all this stuff. And the technology that we're using, apart from LLMs, right, and now like agents, a lot of the other stuff like enrichment data and like intent signals and like integration platforms, like it's not really, it's not new stuff, and on the AI stuff or on the AI side, like a lot of teams, we just ran this like really big survey with 300 something go to market teams, trying to figure out like how everyone's using AI and whatnot. And, I think the takeaway is like the technology is like ubiquitous. Like everyone has access to the same technology. Everyone has access to this sort of like pay as you go kind of data enrichment consumption, et cetera. And like no one really is implementing it yet. And my working theory is that we're sort of hitting the stagnation where in how we all think about kind of go to market, where it's pretty much like zero sum in every market. Everyone's kind of like focused on replacing existing products or like budget line items with budgets that are, at best marginally better than, your competitors. And like the alpha in go to market now is in like trying to figure out how you can replace or displace, existing products or like other companies that are, sort of fighting for the same line item on the budget than the next like 3 to 4 vendors that like, honestly probably do more or less the same exact thing as you, right? So I think what's next in go to market is, I don't know that it's like, I definitely think we're going to see new products, and I hope we see new products and like people continue to build here. But I think it's the biggest unlock will probably be a shift. Like I think it'll be like an operational framework on like what go to market actually is and how you kind of like make all these pieces work together for one goal, and that one goal being like kind of like winning your market, right? Whatever that means. But that's, I don't think that very many go-to-market teams, are optimizing for winning their market. It's really about kind of driving incremental gains in productivity or efficiency and whatnot, and kind of like, taking a tool and trying to squeeze as much alpha or juice out of it. So, I do think like what's next is kind of a shift in like how we think about like what it means to actually, go to market. So, and how we do that, how we build for it from day one.
So how are you going to pivot default when that happens?
May or may not be in the process right now. So, yeah.
Default 2.0 coming.
Yeah. Oh, it's coming. So, lots of cool stuff. I mean, I definitely want to start, I think we want to start writing a lot more about this and kind of like putting our thoughts in public and whatnot. But, we think a lot about all these things, all these themes. So.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this a lot. I feel like you're way more philosophical than I thought you would be. But it's interesting. You have a lot of great takes. You can tell you definitely put a lot of thought into this. I can also tell you've read a lot of business books. And
I have, yeah. I haven't read like too many like how-to business books. I really like these like biographies and like autobiographies, and like one of my favorite ones is this. Of course, I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's the history of the Standard Oil Company, which I've been reading about quite a bit. Thinking, reading through like the, how all that sort of like came to be in the 1800s and how it all evolved to like the railroad system and like the industries that, it sort of propped up and everything. So it's been pretty interesting, very analogous to the AI revolution in some ways. So.
Do you follow Ray Dalio?
I actually don't, not much.
Okay. I mean, his whole thing is history repeats itself. It's like what's happened today. Yeah. It's just going to be a different variation of what's already happened. Just history is going to continue to repeat itself over and over and over again.
Yeah. There's a really good essay by Samo Burja, which is it's very interesting. It's very thought provoking. It's called I think it's called Great Founder Theory. And it was published in like 2020 or 2021, I think. And it's a really, really good piece. It's very long. It's like 183 pages or something, but it's a very, very good read about a lot of this stuff. So
send everything over. All the reading material.
I will.
Send it our way.
I will.
Cool. Well, Nico, it's been awesome getting to know you a little bit more, learning more about what's coming for Default, the origin story. I mean, you guys have a great story. You guys are crushing it. I have no doubt you're going to continue to crush it. And
appreciate it.
Very soon, we're going to need to have it set up for us too, or we'll just set it up for ourselves. But very, very soon, because the inbound leads, thankfully, they're coming.
Yeah. Well, you know where to find me.
I do.
Sweet.
All right. Well, Nico, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, guys. Good catching up.